Well, today Everest and I are coming into the kitchen to pick up where we left off. Where we finished before, we had just finished doing all of the painting and caulking, and everything is cured and ready to get on to the finishing touches. That means installing electrical, including the recessed lighting that goes into the ceiling. I've got Everest doing all of the outlet installation while I locate and cut the holes for the drop-in lights that go into the ceiling. He's pretty smart when it comes to electricity in the basic sense already. He already knows the differences between AC and DC voltage and has actually had a pretty extensive training in building electronic circuits. So he basically understands the ideas between complete circuits and switches and resistors and all those kind of things. But if you have an understanding of all of those more advanced components, then you can definitely understand the basics of a simple installation of AC electricity. So I just had to show him a little bit of how to actually make the wire connections in the box so that they were to code and everything was in good shape. And then he could go through and make sure that all of the outlets were installed. While he made those connections, I went through and worked out the more intricate connections of the circuitry in the switch box to get the power distributed out to the outlets and up to the lights. But of course, I took the time to show him how I was making the connections and explain the circuit with him so that he understood what I was doing and why. Now all that was left was for me to go through the leapfrogging connection of every one of these light boxes. I'm using these drop-in remodel style lights for the kitchen, and I've found that I just really like using these lights. They're fairly inexpensive. They're LED, so they only draw about 7 or 8 watts per light, and they have a built-in electrical box for all the connections that just drops in above the drywall. And you can make the holes wherever they need to be after the fact and then snap them right into place. They also have a slider switch inside the control and connection box that allows you to choose whether they're 3, 4, or 5K light frequency for the bright white versus the warm white color. And I went with the 4K for this room. Now that it's all connected and the breakers are on, I'm just going through every single one of these outlets with my little plug-in tester. This thing's a great little tool, and it just lights up to show you if there's any kind of issues with the circuit. If there's an open neutral, if there's an open ground, if the neutral and power are reversed, or if there's any kind of issues. That way it indicates on the LEDs. Everything checks out, so we are good to go. And I could put on whatever outlet covers I have. I do not, however, have the covers for the double switches, so I wasn't able to get those installed. The next day, I wanted to get started getting the gas line ran, so I had to locate and drill the hole through the back wall for where the termination point comes up through the concrete that we poured. Then I had to cut the nipple to a pretty precise length and re-thread the end. That way I could keep the tolerances very tight. I want to make sure that when it comes through the wall and I install the T to change direction and split over for the gas stove, that gas stove line can stay right against the wall and be clamped and supported in, while it also continues on down the other direction and can also stay against the wall. I don't want to have to deal with having gaps behind it. With that first service T in place, then I could measure and mark and drill the hole through this wall for the second service T. Now this is going to be for future use, but I need to get it in now so that everything can line up where it needs to go. Then, because I have it, I decided to use my little laser level to throw out a line so that I could make sure that the gas line sits pretty close to flat down both walls and has a nice looking finish. I know that both of these lines are going to be tucked in behind cabinets when it's all said and done, but I still would like it to be pretty close to even as best as I can when I'm doing it. Well, I guess that's as far as I'm going to go for right now. I thought I had it all planned out, and I was pretty close, but I think I had initially planned on that longer piece going in between the two T's in the corner over here, which would have put me out where I need to be. Somewhere along the line, I decided I wanted it short and close so that the T going through the wall towards the shop would be closer to the corner. So I need a coupling, and I don't have one, so I'll have to go get one, and then I can continue this. Our tankless water heater is going to go up on top up here, and this valve will come up and be the shut off going into that. There'll be a flex hose that goes from the shut off valve to the appliance. I've put a couple of things for provisions for future. The reason I put the line going through this wall into the shop side is in case we've talked about it many times, and in case we decide to go with a gas like shop furnace as a backup source of heat, some kind of redundancy there. That line comes through the corner, and I can bring it up to a ceiling mounted furnace or anything like that if I choose to go that route in the future. That gets it through the wall. Once we get cabinets in here, I don't want to have to mess around with trying to get to that gas line. So that gets it out there, and it's capped on the other side. And then if I need to, I can pull that cap and go ahead and run whatever gas line I need to, run it wherever I need to from there. Also here on the elbow coming up, I'm going to put a T there, and I'm going to cap in the end of that, or plug in the end of that, so that if I have to add any kind of space heat in this room, I can easily mount like a wall mount vent free thermostat heater or something like that on the wall, and just pull the plug out of the T and put a service line for the heater. That thought has also come up in our conversations about being on the outside of this wall. So if we continue to that, we could go straight through and do that as well. So anyway, those are just a couple options I put in there just so I don't have to dismantle the pipe structure in order to get a union in there or some kind of tap to go to anything else in the future. Some of those things will shake out as we get using it. We may find that we never have a use for that, but that's just how things go. Sometimes you have a really good plan for how you're going to use it. You get in and start using it, and you realize, well, we don't quite use it that way, but we could really use it this other way a little bit better. So those are just provisions that help for that. So all this is going to be behind the cabinets. I've decided when I build the cabinets, I'm going to do them without a back, and I will notch around the pipe so the cabinet can sit pretty well flush to the wall and hide the pipe. But I've got water lines that got to go in there as well. I wanted those exposed into the room, and initially when we had planned on the cabinets and the counter space in here, we were thinking very, very industrial, like stainless steel countertop workspaces, the shelf style, industrial kitchen kind of style. And then we ended up with a whole bunch of excess melamine, and it doesn't make sense to go and spend a bunch of money on stainless steel countertops and cabinet or shelves or workspaces, whatever they call them, to put in here and have to store melamine that I've already paid for and cut, so I can't return it. So we're going to build the cabinets anyway, but I may go ahead and get started getting the heater mounted into place and figure out my dimensions for everything there, where that's all going to sit. Before we installed the drywall, I'd gone ahead and pulled out the installation instructions for this tankless heater so that I could figure out and locate exactly where these intake and exhaust pipes needed to run. I needed them to go to the outside of the building, but knew that this thing would be mounted to the inside wall. I did not, however, want to stare at those pipes going across the ceiling in here. So I wanted to make sure that they went through the floor joists and exited the building appropriately. Now that the drywall was in place and everything was all buttoned up, and it's time to install the water heater, I had to build a little bit of a shim board here for the mounts to screw into the studs and get my dimension away from the wall and make sure that I had all the same tolerances needed for the water heater. This unit comes with a hook style mounting bracket with plenty of holes so that you can get it mounted right onto the studs and make sure that it's plenty secured. And then you just have to lift the thing up into place and get it hooked on, and then secure the bottom bracket right into the studs as well to make sure it doesn't come off the wall. I'm going to come in here to the kitchen. First off, do a little cleanup of my boxes and everything. But I'm going to finish connecting the gas line up to the water heater. I've got to shorten my vertical standpipe. It comes up to about here. So I'm going to shorten that by about 3 to 4 inches so that it ends. I think I want the shutoff valve to end right about the height of the outlets. And then I've got a flex hose that will come up from there and flex and come into the inlet. That should finish up the gas for the water heater and have the connections all run, everything. And then I don't have everything to run the water lines. I have some things, and I'm gonna need some other things. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start putting things together, laying them out on the wall for the things that I have. I have fixtures for the walls, the hose fixtures. So I'm gonna go ahead and put those in place, get things stubbed out so that I know what connections I need for those, and kind of start connecting some things that I have just so that I know what I need. I'm gonna need some 1-inch poly that I don't have. I probably have a little bit of the service line poly up in the junkyard, but I'm not gonna go digging through the snow for that little. I don't need much of it. I need a couple of feet to come from here and over to get ready for the water softener that'll sit here, and then feed from there back up to the water heater. So I need a little bit of 1-inch. I've got some 3/4 that I'll run for the main lines probably, and then 1/2 inch off of that 3/4. Probably run 1/2 inch lines up to the sink faucet. I don't know. We'll get that stuff connected so that we can get closer to having water connected in here and water usable. And then see what we need to pick up to get the rest of the connections made. So that's all set. Just trying to burn through materials that we have kicking around and get as much of this functioning and put together as we can. A while back, I bought this little kit box that you see here on top of the paint bucket, and I filled it with all kinds of different PEX fittings for doing water line installations. And as much as I'd like to think that I could be prepared for a water line installation with that kit, it just never quite seems to be exactly enough, and there's always something that you just happen to need to make it complete. So I'll finish up the gas line, and then I'll look over the entire connectivity of the water lines to figure out what fittings I'm going to have to pick up, because I don't want to buy them redundantly. As much as I'd love to stay dedicated on this project alone, this winter weather is causing me to take a day or two at a time to deal with snow removal and the corresponding repairs. So we're just going to keep chipping away at this kitchen as much as we can, whenever we can, and try to use up these materials in between all the storms.